Hey guys! In this short video, I want to give you a short overview of the most relevant tools for creating interactive web animations. This means I will tell you about Adobe Animate CC, Tumult Hype, GreenSock animation platform, and Google Web Designer. In case you have watched my preview video on the big picture for interactive web animations, you might already know that there is quite a difference regarding the underlying technologies for authoring tools. Since the different tools out there all rely on the different technologies, choosing the right tool is not only a matter of interface and workflow, but can make the difference between success and failure in your projects. Unfortunately, with the web itself being such a moving target, there's no perfect choice in regarding the perfect authoring tool. It is merely a pondering of pros and cons, ideally for each and every project. Therefore, I hope this short video will help you understand the difference between the different authoring tools and help you make the right decision. So let's get started. Here we go. First of all, let's start with the more code-centric approach using GreenSock animation platform, but don't be afraid. It really requires just a little bit of code, and even if you're not familiar with that, it's still interesting to see how it actually works, and maybe one or two of you might be encouraged to take a closer look, so bear with me on this one. So GreenSock is the most robust, most convenient animation platform using JavaScript on the web. So it's well used, well written. There's an active community around it, and it's highly recommended. So if you want to use code, want to use lightweight, performant animations, GreenSock might be just the tool for you. And you will find more information on that on greensock.com/gzap if you want to take a closer look. Now, let's take a look at an example here. Assume you have created an illustration just like that, maybe in Illustrator, and use Illustrator to set IDs for your different layers here. You can then save the illustration as SVG document. I don't know if you know about that, but you can directly out of Illustrator save as SVG. Not replacing it by now, and then use it with an object tag to include it into your HTML website. Of course, you have to load GreenSock animation platform as well in order to use the library. This is what the result looks like in a browser without further ado. So let's take a look at the element itself using the object tag. Allows me to still access all the different layers of the SVG, and if you take a closer look here, the IDs are still the same as the layer names in Illustrator, which is pretty convenient since we can now use them to address the different elements on code level. First of all, of course, we have to wait for the document to load the SVG, and then we can access the SVG document and then look for this particular ID within the SVG. And now the fun part begins. We can now add a timeline and add animations to this timeline. For instance, transforming the position of this man by 400 milliseconds, 500 pixels to the right and 500 pixels to the top, and then start the animation. If I save this in the code and refresh the browser, you see that the animation now already takes place. We can then add a little bit more to the timeline. For instance, let the timeline wait for one second before starting the animation, and use a from animation to set the initial position of the man, 500 pixels to the left and 500 pixels to the bottom. Use easings as well. So it's pretty convenient what we can do here. And just like that, I can create even more complex animations using one and the same kind of syntax here. So once you got the hang of it, it's really straightforward. And to show you what GreenSock is really capable of, we can include all the arrows into one array. If you don't know what an array is, it's pretty much a collection of different elements, and then add one animation sequence to this entire list of elements. Hit save, go back to the browser, and if you take a look at the arrows, they all appear with the same animation, but this animation takes place one after another. So it's pretty powerful here, and just a few lines of code already create a complex web animation. So check out GreenSock if you want to know more about that. So it's really easy to use, and you pretty soon get the hang of it, and it's actually fun to use. So you might want to check it out. But of course, you might assume or realize that creating really complex animations can be then tedious if you have to write every instruction using code. And this is one of the biggest problems with the web by now, or at the moment, that the web browser only understands code. So designing in the browser actually feels more like coding in the browser. You still have to write a lot of code to get things done. And this is where authoring tools like Adobe or Tumult Hype come into play. So let's take a look at the tools that are available out there for web animations. We used to have Flash Professional as the authoring tool for any rich content out there. Then there's After Effects as animation tool, but mostly for, or pretty much only for video. So we don't take a closer look at this one in this particular instance, since we want to create interactive web animations, and you can't add interactivity in After Effects. Then there was Adobe Edge Animate. It was an authoring tool for HTML5 DOM manipulation, and it was a pretty awesome tool. But unfortunately, not everybody would agree on that particular topic. And so it is unfortunately no longer around. But for those of you who love this tool like we did, there is an alternative with Tumult Hype, which is pretty much the same approach. So again, HTML5 DOM manipulation, what you see is what you get. So you can pretty much design in the browser. You have a web interface that allows you, or an interface that allows you to actually create web animations in a browser instance, which is pretty awesome. And this allows you to create awesome web animations. And then Flash Professional got rebranded as Adobe Animate CC. So you don't confuse Animate CC with Edge Animate, because it's a completely different technological approach. This animation tool focuses on HTML5 canvas for web animations, and is more, or is pretty much similar to Flash Professional in terms of interface and how to work with the tool. Then there's Google Web Designer. This is a tool from Google, especially for creating banner ads. So if you want to create HTML5 banners for the Google environment, this tool might be interesting for you. In other cases, it's not really convenient to create web animations, so we're not focusing too much on that. So let's take a look at each of them a little bit closer. So Animate CC by Adobe. It's probably the most dominant tool, authoring tool for interactive web animations. We've got a visual interface. So this is what the interface looks like pretty much. So you've got a timeline, you've got a stage, you directly see what's going on, and you can interact with the elements and arrange your layouts visually, which is pretty powerful to create complex animation choreographies with these. It's 100% web standard compatible. So if you create web animations with Animate CC. They work everywhere where HTML5 also works. And it's a great tool to combine both worlds, the best of both worlds, from design and code. So it's convenient for a designer to create content using Animate CC, but it's also very convenient for a coder to add JavaScript and logic using the API or plain JavaScript here. Let's take a look at some examples. You can use Animate CC to create video-like teaser animations using special like visual effects, and use it for storytelling. So any kind of animations in this regard is very easily done in Animate. You can use it to create browser games and interactive elements where you can select points like score, and like this tiny agility game. You can create eye candy effects like this parallax animation that is controlled by the position of the mouse cursor. You can create configurators, so dynamically change content, or even more complex games. So where does Animate fit into the workflow? Animate CC is a creation tool. You can already draw and create content in Animate. It's a vector authoring tool, but you can of course also use vector tools like Illustrator or pixel graphic tools like Photoshop to create assets. Animate then is of course a great tool to bring those assets to life using the timeline. So create animations, add interactivity then using the Animate API, JavaScript, libraries like Create.js or dedicated Animate Commons library, and then you can publish it to any modern browser. You can export as video, you can use it in complex web app projects, and you can even use it for e-publications. The published formats for the web are primarily HTML5 canvas. It already has some preview export options for WebGL, so it's already targeting WebGL, although it's not first-class citizen yet. And SVG can be used as a plugin. This is why I would rather leave it out here. So it's more experimental, not for productive purposes as such. So basically, Animate relies on Create.js. It's a library created by Grant Skinner for HTML5 animations in the canvas. It's been around for quite some while, so it's well documented, and it's been around, so it's already well tested. The SVG plugin relies on Snap SVG, but I don't go into detail here that much because it has pretty much been abandoned, unfortunately. Let's take a look at the tool itself. Here we've got a character that we now want to animate onto the scenery. So first of all, I need to add some frames in order to create some time span here. It's a frame-based animation tool, so I need frames to have a duration here. Now I can add a tween to this character layer. I use a classic tween here since it's a pretty basic animation. So the initial state is already set. Now I move a little bit along in the timeline and reposition my character, probably to this particular part. As you can see, it's pretty convenient to have this visual authoring capabilities here, and this already creates this animation here. So now I've got this animation coming in, And I can also add some easing to this animation in order to, for instance, an ease out, in order to make it a little bit more lively. Back animation is always a good choice here to add this kind of comic effect, making the character move a little bit further than he actually has to go, and then come in nice and easy. Let's take a look in the browser. Boop, there we go. Already created my first animation. And if I inspect it in the browser, as promised, it's a canvas, so everything here is taken care of by the authoring tool. I create an HTML file, and in this HTML file lies a canvas that then renders the entire animation. If I want to add interactivity, for instance, make the laptop a clickable element, I need, first of all, to create a movie clip in order to have an instance name. It's pretty much like an ID, and then I can use this ID to address it using JavaScript. Here I already prepared a script layer, and in Animate I can use actions in order to add interactivity, add code, add logic here. It's pretty straightforward code editor, and now I can simply say, look in this particular scene for an element with the name laptop, and then use on as command to add an event listener for the click event. And then I can use custom functions here, anonymous functions. This is plain JavaScript, to use a window open command. Anybody who is a little bit familiar with JavaScript is already understanding what I'm doing here. So now I can enter an HTTP website, for instance, tourdeanimate.com. There we go. I don't even have to save this. It's already remembered in this particular frame right here. So now this element, this movie clip with the name laptop, has an event listener listening for a click event. So whenever I go into the browser and click on this element, it opens up a new browser instance, browser window, navigating to this window. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Of course, you can do a lot more with Animate CC. By the way, Tour de Animate offers a lot of examples. Some of them I've already shown to you. So you can download the entire samples here to get familiar with this fascinating authoring tool. Now let's move on to the next one, Tumult Hype. As I mentioned before, it's pretty similar to Edge Animate, and it's also an authoring tool for interactive web animations, but Tumult Hype is more designer-centric, designer-friendly than Animate CC. Again, it comes with a visual design surface, so on that particular level, it's pretty comparable to Animate CC, and it also allows you to create web animations. Let me show you some examples here. I've already prepared some. Of course, you can have banner animations with transitions and moving elements around. You got infographics where you can use the multiple timelines to create this nice or relative timelines to create this nice effect that all the other elements rearrange as soon as I click on one. You might already be familiar with our little ski jumping game, so also games are something you can easily create using Tumult Hype, and even entire website, since it's HTML that you create here, and it offers some nice support for breakpoints, media query breakpoints, so you can even make it pretty responsive. In short, Tumult Hype uses HTML5 DOM manipulation. It's designed without code. It's the official claim. Although you can use code if you want to. It can be easily enhanced with code. So you're not limited to using the interface. Although I have to admit that it's not as rich in the API as Animate CC. But on the other hand, you can do more using the interface. So it's more convenient for a designer. Adaptive layouts and scenes are something that is really helpful. It's so more convenient for creating responsive web animations than Animate CC out of the box. It got some nice features like relative timelines. It has physics engine on board. And one of the major drawbacks, however, is that it's only for macOS available. Let's take a look at the tool, however. Already opened a project here. So similar to the one that we had in Animate CC, I want to create a small web animation here. Again, I have a character on my timeline and some other elements. The interface looks pretty similar, but it has some differences in detail. For instance, I can use the record mode to clearly define when I want to create animations and when I want to make layout changes. So now I want to create an animation. So I engage the record mode and set a time frame, move the element, and already have an animation created. And out of the box, or per default, Hype already creates an easing or adds an easing to the animation. It's an ease in out, which is pretty basic for this kind of animations, so I don't have to worry about that. Let's take a look in the browser. There we go, already created. It was a little bit faster and more convenient than Animate CC in this regard. And this more convenient and more designer approach becomes more obvious when it comes to adding interactivity or basic interactivity. I can choose any element, add, for instance, a click event, set go to URL, and add the URL here right away, so I don't have to type that much of code. For instance, tourthehype.com, pretty convenient. And now if I preview it in the browser, you see that the mouse cursor changes already and opens up the new URL. If you want to learn more about Hype and its particular samples, or watch samples and download samples and tutorials, you can go to tourthehype.com, a website that we also created especially to showcase examples for Hype. So feel free to go there. All the assets are freely available, so just dig in and enjoy. Last but not least, Google Web Designer is an authoring tool. As I mentioned before, it's pretty much only convenient to use when you create web ads that don't require much animation parts, but are focused more on fast delivery for the Google network. And Google Web Designer supports you with presets and with the right environment. So if you focus on that, it might be an interesting tool for you. But in other instances, for creating creative web animations, it's not really a convenient tool. So I'd not recommend it. So in a nutshell, how are these tools in comparison to each other? This is the graphic that I have created, so it's highly opinionated. Feel free to disagree. But I would say Google Web Designer, the last tool, only usable for banners. Tumult Hype is very convenient if you don't want to create highly individualized code-centric animations, but more focus on what the tool really has to offer. It really has a lot of features built into the interface, and once you are familiar with the interface, you can create also complex web animations, yet creating more expressive content. Animate CC still is more convenient, but it requires a lot of work. So things are not as easily done as in Tumult Hype, and you need to know your way with JavaScript or the Animate API to get really astonishing results. So it takes more work, but allows you to create more expressive animations. So it's actually up to you and the kind of project that you're working on, which tool suits you better. So that was my 2 cents on authoring tools for web animations. I hope you now have a better idea on the differences and what they are about. Feel free to leave any questions, to reach out to me if you want to know more about that. And also, check out the samples and free examples on the website that I've shown you before. Also, RichContentDesign.com offers more videos, for instance, one regarding the big picture on web animations. So have fun creating, be creative, and happy animating.